It's been a few weeks now since the second season of Jujutsu Kaisen came to an end, and I did react to it, but now I've had time to think about it, revisit certain moments, and gather all of my thoughts on the arc. And let me just cut right to the chase. There is very good reason why a lot of people have backed Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 to be the anime of the year. So now, let's unpack that. Not just the story, but also the animation, all the news we got surrounding the production of the second season. Also, the anime is the only experience I've had with this second season. I haven't seen how the manga covered this material, how the original did it, so this review will purely be based around the anime. This goes without saying, but spoilers ahead, and let's talk about what has been touted by many as the best arc in Jujutsu Kaisen, the Shibuya Incident. But first, the second season wouldn't be complete without the Hidden Inventory arc, or the Gojo's Past arc, which was the first 5 episodes. I definitely appreciate this arc more after going through Shibuya, but that's not to say that it wasn't great in its own right. Focuses on the story of Gojo and Geto during their time as students and how they came to be who they are in the present story. So the plot is that they are given a mission to transport the Star Plasma vessel, a girl called Rika, to the protector of the Jujutsu world, Master Tengen. But what I want to focus on for this arc isn't the plot, but more so the characters and what we see and learn about them, specifically Gojo, Geto, and Toji. Firstly, Gojo, he's carefree in the modern day, but he is very carefree in the past. We learn a lot more about his abilities like Limitless and the reversed curse technique, which is the multiplication of normal negative cursed energy to get positive cursed energy, which is a nice way of summing up the vibe we get from Gojo. To get to the positive, you need more of the negative, because without the negativity, there's no such thing as positivity. You know, there's no such thing as highs if you don't have the lows. And Gojo rolls with that to do what he sees fit to change the world. And then Geto, he is 100% my favourite part of this backstory. This is basically his descent into darkness and the reasoning on why he became who he became. He comes to the conclusion of cutting out curses from the source, with the source being people who give out all that negative energy. But how we got there is the most intriguing part. He has your standard rivalry with Gojo about reaching the top, and the more we learn about him, the more we can see his perspective of things. Not that we should excuse his idea of genocide, of course. He describes curses as tasting like vomit, and that's just disgusting. But you could see as that being just played as a simple joke. But that's one of the things that when you try to step into his shoes, it's so much worse. That one thing kind of symbolizes his whole deal. Even his abilities themselves are messing with him. And then you have Riko's death and the village and all of that, whilst devouring curses on a regular basis. And it's a lot clearer why he turned out this way. Why protect the one thing that's the cause of everything bad, you know? And then lastly, Toji, who I can see in both Gojo's and Geto's story here. The only person to have no cursed energy thanks to the heavenly restriction, something that you can link with Geto's path of getting rid of curses and cursed energy, but also he is very dangerous. He stood on his own 2 feet without any cursed energy, and his fight with Gojo proves Gojo's mortality. He had his own conflict in the Jujutsu world, specifically with the Zenin clan, which represents another reason why I enjoyed this arc. All the different perspectives we get from each of the characters tell their own story. But with that said, now let's move on to the Shibuya Incident Arc. So Geto and Mahito and everyone else are now moving forward with their plan, and it is all going to go down in Shibuya, but we start with a rather unexpected fight between Mahito and Mekamaru. And it's clear to see the Evangelion inspiration, but in this short amount of time, even though he definitely still isn't one of my favourite characters, I did enjoy the little we got on his character and relationship with Miwa. It was a great way to get the arc going, no setup but rather go, go, go. And the animation from the off is just incredible. Then the next portion of the arc, the sealing of Gojo Satoru. So Gojo, being the overpowered beast that he is, there were probably only a few ways of pulling this off without it feeling cheap, and I think it was pulled off as best as it could have been. And it also serves to add a decent level of competence to Geto and the others, because I feel like often with complex villain plans in anime, They are either actually not that complex at all, or things just happen to go their way. But in this case it works really well, isolating Gojo in an area where he shouldn't be able to exercise his power, surrounded by all those civilians. But also the fact that Geto, Hanami, Choso and Jogo are all there shows that they know he's still a threat all the way up to the moment he is actually sealed. And even then, Gojo still feels like the strongest as he begins taking out curses and even killing Hanami. Both sides were massively pushing each other, and when Gojo was finally captured, it felt like it was earned through a tough struggle. And it's also here that we get the revelation that it's not actually Geto standing before everyone, but someone else who has taken over his body. And that just made the ending of the prequel Jujutsu Kaisen 0 make so much more sense. Gojo did kill Geto back then, but it seems that whoever is in this body doesn't have full control, as if the essence of the real Geto is still in there and fighting back. While all this is going on, Yuji takes on a cursed spirit, and here we get the second animation point of the video. When this happened in the anime, there were complaints about ghosting or dimming during the fight. And in all honesty, yeah, at times it did look incoherent and a bit rough. But the reason I bring this up is that this is probably the worst that the second season looked. So that just goes to show how insane literally every other fight ended up being. And I mean, even in the same episode, Choso's blood techniques looked ridiculous. Anyway, moving on with the story, Itadori informs everyone that Gojo has been sealed, and we move with him, Megumi and Ino to take on the curse users protecting the barrier. And we learn in their little flashback that Gojo simply existing shifted the whole landscape of the world. And I know the word him is thrown around a lot, but if that is not the definition of he is him, then I do not know what is. And Toji Fushiguro is back, but it's not your standard resurrection. I think it was first meant to be a way to access Toji's prowess and abilities, but his soul took over. And this is interesting because it's definitely connected to Mahito and his soul philosophy, but also to Geto's body and the person controlling it. Both times the original owner fought back for control, and I do wonder if this will lead to anything in the future now that I am reading the manga, especially given the fact that Mahito is absorbed at the end of this arc and he's no longer around, so how will the concept of souls play a part in the future? And next comes my personal favourite fight of the arc, Choso vs Yuji. Not only is the animation amazing, but the choreography on display is insane. And Choso gets a new memory with Itadori, just like Todo did, and with info from the end of the arc, there are a lot of similarities between Todo and Choso, surprisingly. Of course, surrounding Yuji's character, of course. And Yuji is fed more of Sukuna's fingers, by the way, and oh my gosh, will this arc give us a moment to breathe. Nanami, Megumi, Maki and Naobito Zenin are all fighting a cursed spirit called Dagon in its domain expansion, which is a beach, and I'm guessing that this is where Geto and the others were all hanging out in season 1. Anyway, Toji gets involved and absolutely destroys this guy. I see Toji's inclusion in this arc as the conclusion to his story, but it's also here where I get a bit confused about what's going on, because we know he has a hatred for the Zenin clan, so when he enters the domain I feel like it would make sense for him to go right after Naobito, but he doesn't. He goes after Dagon first. That's the only thing that I don't really get, is what he does after beating Dagon. Like, I understand him going after the strongest, so Dagon first makes sense. After that, I don't know who's the strongest. I'm not gonna try and guess, but I feel like regardless, surely at some point he would go after Naobito Zenin, because he's still Toji, he still has that grudge, but I don't know. But how we end his story is actually kind of wholesome. When he finds out that Megumi isn't a member of the Zenin clan, he kills himself as if he's satisfied, he's got what he wanted. But back to the others, Jogo just casually dealing with them was so disrespectful, and while we do see Nanami again, Maki's fate is left unknown, so I assume she's alive since she wouldn't die off screen, but apart from that I have no idea. On a side note though, let me say that I am a big fan of the variety of different techniques and strategies that are on show here. It adds that extra layer, just like I said with the Geto's plan. I'll be honest, I'm not the greatest at keeping track of all of them, but they are really fun nonetheless. And I've neglected talking about Meme. The main thing I will say about her character is that her demeanor is very interesting to me. It's like a confidence, but different to Gojo's kind of confidence, and you have some seduction mixed in, although now that I'm saying that, it sounds very bad given what we see her doing later, and trust me, we will get to that. Speaking of Sukuna, he's here now, and he honestly might be one of my favorite new gen anime villains. I've always been a fan of the evil without remorse kind of guys, and the way Sukuna is just so casually evil is so fun. I mean, the way he cuts off Jogo's head for not bowing low enough, or killing the two girls for trying to order him around, is just that kind of petty brutality I want to see from a pure evil bad guy. And then the next outrageously good fight, Sukuna versus Jogo. Jogo, who we saw easily handle Nanami, Maki and Naobito, gets his ass handed to him. Also, he gets his death handed to him. But the interesting thing is here that Sukuna acknowledged his strength. So maybe there's more to Sukuna than meets the eye. Because for the most part, he's just been disrespecting everybody, but this is the one time he shows respect. I don't know. I would say it feels out of place, but I don't think we know enough about him for me to say that. And also, poor Jogo, he just had to go against Gojo and Sukuna, the two strongest characters in the story. So back to it, Megumi's role seems very important, but not important right now. From Gojo's own words saying that the 10 Shadows user could rival the 6 Eyes and Limitless, as well as Sukuna's interest in him, and add to that the fact that when Megumi unleashes something that none of the 10 Shadow users could tame, the Mahoraga. It's like all of these things are pointing to the same statement, like eventually Megumi will be able to do this and he'll be doing that, and so on. It feels like we're being drip-fed Megumi foreshadowing or something. And straight to another unfairly good fight. I say unfairly because I'm running out of words to describe the fights, but also because it's genuinely not fair to other anime studios that this is what they have to compete with. It's Sukuna versus Mahoraga. Megumi's down for the count, but this fight is the definition of balls to the walls. I mean, how the heck? It's around this time that the news came out and spread about animators complaining about the dreadful working conditions they were put under to complete it, and there was even speculation that the rest of season 2 was going to be cancelled. But that didn't happen, and they still delivered some of the greatest fights anime has ever seen. The Sukuna vs Mahoraga fight was a bit hard to follow at one point, but it was 11 out of 10 everywhere else. I saw that the animators were only able to implement 30% of their ideas or something like that. So just imagine how this fight could have looked like. Again, Sukuna wins, and then Malevolent Shrine just kills everyone, and he chooses to bring back Yuji. This is what I mean by him being purely disrespectful, like he purposefully brought back Yuji so he could see the destruction and devastation caused. And here is why Yuji shows why he's one of the best new gen protagonists. He's so human, it's realistic. His reactions to things, like he is indirectly the cause of all of this destruction, and he understands that, so he breaks down. He does keep going because if he stops here, then this fallout will be his legacy kind of, but things only get worse from here, because now we move on to the death of Nanami. Normally I would be critical about the time spent on the mourning of a character's death, especially one as significant as Nanami. But in this case, given the situation, I think it works best for it to seem like Yuji is being bombarded with loss, guilt and suffering, like at a fast pace, and he has no time to mourn. That sounds bad, but you get what I'm trying to say. We also see his resolve. Because of this, he keeps pushing to go after Mahito. Yes, it's mostly out of hatred, but he keeps going nonetheless. But on another side note, I will include that other Mei thing here, because we see her in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, which is where Nanami wanted to go. She's now living her best life and casually discussing stocks so selfishly as if Shibuya never happened. And on the other hand, Nanami died, leaving everything to Yuji. It's like Nanami and Mei, those two characters, like what they got is probably or most definitely not what they deserved. But the elephant in the room, what's going on here? Is Mei grooming her own younger brother? I put together that she was sort of using him during the fighting, but this is crazy, and it did feel kind of out of place, you know. Maybe it would have been better to have this after all the fighting was done, or even at the beginning of the next arc. Anyway, now it's time for Nobara's big fight with Mahito, And this links back to what I was saying earlier about the different abilities and strategies. Like, she puts up a fight. I think it's one of the most underrated fights of the season. Like, her abilities work better against Mahito than someone else's. However, back to Yuji, we also see him reach the end of his stick with Nobara's supposed death, which I'll get to. And if it wasn't for outside intervention, he would have ended it. He would have just let it go then and there, with that outside intervention being Todo. But back to Nobara. She's another one whose fate is left unknown, but just like Maki, I think she is alive. Arata says that Yuji shouldn't get his hopes up, but that's enough for me to assume that she will come back eventually. Otherwise, what was the point of making that statement? But if she does stay dead and we ignore Arata's statement, I think it was a nicely written one. Okay, next fight, and I guess we are not going to get any time at all to breathe, because now it's Mahito versus Yuji and Todo. And my favourite thing about this fight, or just about Mahito in general, is the cartoonish and chibi-esque way he uses his abilities, all cheerfully as well, as if he's not actively messing around with people, messing up their bodies and transfiguring kids in a playground. Todo even loses an arm. Like, I know this arc isn't pulling any punches, but I thought that Todo, being the latecomer, would be spared, but even he must face the consequences of all this. And the conclusion of this fight. Mahito's true form looks cool. I do prefer his human patchy appearance though, but the way Yuji was stalking him down was an amazing visual, and I did not expect him to get absorbed. In all honesty, I feel like Mahito still did have a bit more to give to the story. I don't hate the way he ended out. In fact, I think it was really well done, but it would have worked even better if we got more of his character and his end came later on in the story, if that makes sense, if he was around for a bit longer. And to end the arc, we lost, and apparently Choso is Yuji's brother. That memory thing actually matters, it's not just a joke. From what was said with Choso having 3 parents, his mother impregnated by a curse, and the person controlling Geto, who they called Kamo, was a third party and mixed his blood in. So my assumption is that the same thing happened with Yuji. His mother was impregnated by a curse, and this fake Geto, Kamo, added his blood to the mix. I don't remember getting anything on his family in the past apart from his grandpa, but if I did miss anything, do let me know. But moving on, the fallout of this arc being that they released a huge amount of curses, non-sorcerers became either vessels or able to use curse techniques. We were saved by Yuki, and what a view that is Yuji is getting, and the existence of curses has been made public. But the biggest thing is undoubtedly the return of Yuta, who, in a twist I wasn't expecting, has been given the role of Yuji's executioner. Gojo was also branded as a criminal, but he has been sealed, and even when unsealed, there isn't anyone who can contend with him, so the Jujutsu higher-ups kind of messed up with that one, I think. But all in all, the world has flipped on its head, and I am definitely reading the manga now. What a season it was. It wasn't perfect, but if you're watching this part now, then you've seen the rest of the review, and you know that I didn't have any major issues at all. And here's to hoping the manga will be just as good, if not better.